And here we go. All right, everyone, welcome in on this Monday, July. I was going to say it's July. No, we're already in August 3rd, 2020. Good to see you here on Morning Invest. So happy that you are here and you are subscribed and you're smashing that bell notification so you'll be notified as soon as we go live. This is the only morning business show for the average American, not the Wall Street type. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to cover a couple of the big stories for you this morning. We're going to be looking more deeply today at the stimulus negotiations and where those sit right now. It was a favorable weekend of debate, even though most of the Senate is home. Again, they took the weekend off. The major players were around to try to go deeper into the stimulus negotiation. We'll show you where things stand this morning, even though they're still wide apart. We're going to be talking about the idea of going under a total lockdown for the next 4 to 6 weeks in order to stop the spread of coronavirus. We'll tell you who is floating that idea, as the U.S. has not gotten a handle on this thing. We're going to be looking at the latest with the Trump campaign and where things sit with their latest poll numbers, as well as the vice presidential race right now for Joe Biden's pick for vice president. It's getting kind of messy inside the Biden camp. We're going to tell you about some of that reporting and so much more on the show today. But before we get started, I do want you to remember that you can sign up for our very free newsletter delivered straight to your inbox, totally free every morning, where you can get the most of the news. You can read in about 5 minutes over your cup of coffee. Plus, we're working to give away some nice free stuff as we build out new stickers and mugs and other things like that. So please sign up at morninginvest.com, delivered right to your inbox every morning. I think we're nearing 10,000 people right now. So thank you so much to all of you who subscribe to that. Really, really appreciate it. And Grover, my lovely co-host, also appreciates it. He says, he keeps saying that he wants to work on his column inside the newsletter, Grover's Corner, but he's just been doing so much sleeping that he hasn't really gotten around to writing it yet. So I have to remind him a little bit later to get on that. All right. So here are the 5 headlines that I think you need to know as you wake up this morning. Now, let's start this right here with President Trump and the latest on his poll numbers this morning. President Trump spent the weekend playing golf on Saturday. The Trump campaign is getting desperate, though. 92 days as of this morning until Election Day, and only 40 days till some states start early voting. That's right, North Carolina specifically. And guess what? They stopped running their ads. That's right. The White House has decided to stop running ads right now. They have a new campaign manager, of course. You'll remember that the new campaign manager just started a few weeks ago. And what they found is that they put in place about a few weeks ago this major ad push that they were calling the Death Star against Vice President Biden. Yeah, they spent millions. Guess what? It didn't work at all. And so they've paused all of those television campaign ads so that they can see what they need to do, how they can change up their messaging. But folks, early voting starts in September. That means you have just a few weeks when everyone's at the beach, everyone's shut down in August. No one pays attention to anything in August. Now you're going to roll out a whole new ad campaign in August to try to get your campaign off the ground again. And these poll numbers are pretty bad. Take a look at where President Trump is right now across some states that are leaning blue in areas that they had locked down before. I mean, look at Michigan, of course. That's an area that President Trump won surprisingly against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's campaign was run pretty terribly. She also, of course, lost Pennsylvania. Joe Biden is leading in Pennsylvania, Virginia. He's leading in Florida. Remember, no Republican president has won the presidency in 100 years without winning the state of Florida. Look at Illinois, Minnesota, Colorado, New Mexico, and then, of course, out west in blue. But those are areas that are all, and even looking at Texas right now is not a lock. It's still leaning Republican, but that is not a lock, especially if now Republicans are pulling up ads and not running any ads. So there you go. That's the latest on the Trump campaign this morning. Aides are increasingly worried there that the 2020 campaign may already be defined as a referendum on his handling of the coronavirus. So no matter what they do right now, they're saying that they're worried that all Americans see is coronavirus. And there's some floating the idea that we might go back under a full lockdown. That's not going to fly with President Trump 45 days or so before early voting starts in this country. What about Vice President Biden? Well, Vice President Biden in this new poll, of course, is up, and he's showing some signs of strengthening in certain states where Again, Hillary Clinton did not do well against President Trump, but there's also the vice presidential race right now, and it's getting messy inside the Biden camp. And according to sources, there's a lot of jockeying going on for these potential picks. Who's going to be his vice presidential candidate? Will it be Kamala Harris, Karen Bass, Elizabeth Warren? And a lot of Biden allies are worrying right now that this process has become messier, quoting them, messier than it should be. It's pitting women against women, especially black women against black women. They're saying the dynamic threatens to undermine Biden's effort to use the vice presidential search to spotlight some of the party's brightest female stars during the vetting process. And already Donald Trump's campaign is opening up right now, trying to dig up some dirt on whatever vice presidential candidate he ends up picking. And apparently, well, not apparently, the vice presidential race right now, Vice President Biden is not going to announce his VP pick for another 2 weeks. He's delaying that decision. We thought it was going to happen this weekend. Nope. They're still vetting people at this point. It is a mess. But, you know, it is August and no one's really paying attention, so maybe they can quietly do this. Us kind of follow politics, you know, this is interesting, but most Americans simply don't care. And at the end of the day, most Americans don't care about the vice presidency anyway. You know, you get maybe a spike in poll numbers for like a day of popularity because you get all the press. At the end of the day, you're electing the person who, you know, you're electing that main person. You're not electing the vice president. And that's the bottom line in all of this. All right, let's talk about TikTok. I'm sure all of your favorite apps, right? It's your favorite app. This weekend it became clear that TikTok, as we know it, is coming to an end in the United States. It's clear. So, you know, tell your kids now, get in their TikToks as much as they can, because it's about to end in the United States unless they make a wholesale change on this. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said yesterday there's a general consensus among American leadership that TikTok cannot stay in its current format because of risks over Americans' personal data as a Chinese tech company, of course. It's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese tech company. And they say that they could be compelled by law to hand over user information to the Chinese government. That any of these companies that are owned by the Chinese government, Huawei and others, can take whatever user data they want from Americans. You know, facial recognition, bank account information, proprietary business information, you have private messages with people, all of that could just be handed over to the Chinese government. So what happens next? Well, there appear to be two options. One is to ban it completely in the United States, and the second one is to sell it to an American company. Microsoft had been in the running for that, and that would be a boon for Microsoft, which has no social networks, right? You know, Facebook has WhatsApp, they bought Instagram, so that would open up Microsoft as an opportunity to finally get a social network that they could drive some revenue from. But they're apparently taking a pause on it as well, and it appears from the Trump administration they're leaning heavily in favor right now of banning TikTok altogether. Secretary of State Pompeo was on with Maria Bartiromo yesterday and talked about the dangers of Americans just sending all of their data right to China.
Well, here's what I hope that the American people will come to recognize. These Chinese software companies doing business in the United States, whether it's TikTok or WeChat, there are countless more. As Peter Navarro said, are feeding data directly to the Chinese Communist Party, their national security apparatus. Could be their facial recognition pattern, it could be information about their residents, their phone numbers, their friends, who they're connected to. Those are the issues that President Trump's made clear we're going to take care of. These are true national security issues. They're true privacy issues for the American people. And for a long time, the United States just said, well, goodness, if we're having fun with it or if a company can make money off of it, we're going to permit that to happen. President Trump has said enough, and we're going to fix it. And so he will take action in the coming days with respect to a broad array of national security risks that are presented by software connected to the Chinese Communist Party.
Where in the world am I going to get my dancing cat memes and random people falling off of staircase memes? I mean, this is stuff I look forward to every day on TikTok. And my son likes to send me random TikTok videos as well, and he'll sit there and just chuckle to himself for 5-10 minutes. Where am I going to go for that kind of action from now on? So get your TikToks in while you can, because it looks like that's about to be a wholesale change. I saw some people saying in the chat that President Trump doesn't like TikTok because all of those TikTok teenagers ended up really screwing up his rally out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and no one showed up to it. So maybe that's why. Maybe he's got a grudge against it. I don't know. But the Chinese government right now in this escalating war between the United States and China is not looking good, certainly on the trade front, but also on this personal data front, and then their human rights violation front as well, that the United States is trying to put pressure on China. So we'll keep our eye on that. There's no more important country to the health and wellness of America than China right now, and China is becoming the strongest country in the world as we continue to flounder while they take advantage of us on trade, and they take advantage of us on buying up all of our real estate and all of our debt so that we are in debt to the Chinese. So all of that and more from China. Here's another story I was following because I'm an Eagles fan. I woke up to the news this morning. I am excited about the NFL season starting. I do like the fall. I love watching my games on Sundays. That is something I am fond of, and I am an Eagles fan. I know, mock me for it. Then I woke up to this news this morning, which is Doug Peterson, the Eagles head coach, is now tested positive for coronavirus. Come on. Can we catch a break, Eagles fans? Yep, he's being self-quarantined right now. No other players right now have tested positive for it, and obviously in full training camp mode right now, trying to get ready for the season. This all comes against the backdrop of the Major League Baseball right now. And Major League Baseball, more players have tested positive for coronavirus. Cardinals players now testing positive. You also have Cespedes from the Mets basically saying, hey, I'm not playing. He left the team at the hotel and said, you know what, I'm opting out from this season. And other players are saying, we're done. We're opting out. Don't want to play. Major League Baseball looks like it's on the verge of ending their season, although the commissioner is fighting tooth and nail to keep it going. And guess what? TV ratings are up. They're up significantly over last year at this time on television baseball. So you can't go to a game. More people are watching it on television, so they're actually making ad revenue from people watching the games. But these players are worried about their concern, and now you have half the Marlins team contracting coronavirus, Cardinals players. How will the NL, how will the National League play each other if they're all concerned they're going to get coronavirus, or certain teams just decide they're done with their season? They're just forfeiting the season? Again, I come back to this. It's going to be my luck that the Philadelphia Phillies will win this year, and they'll always have an asterisk by their season, Oh, you won in 2020? Good job. That was a tough season for you. You only had to play half the games, and half of the teams didn't even want to play because they were staying home. Good. That'll be my luck, I'm sure. And the other story, remember the story we were following for you last week, the weird seeds that have been showing up in people's mailboxes? Well, now we know where they're coming from. Well, we knew where they were coming from. They were coming from China, but now we know what they're made, what these seeds are. Have any of you received these odd seeds in the mail? Yeah. Thousands of people have been receiving packages of seeds that they did not order, and they're coming from China. Talk about a weird story, right? Federal agency said it identified 14 types of plants from unsolicited packages of seeds that appeared to have been mailed from China. There's a weird mix of ornamental fruit, vegetable, herb, and weed species in here. They're saying they have lavender. There's some hibiscus, there's some rosemary, there's some sage, there's some morning glory, there's some mint, cabbage, mustard, rose. But the Department of Agriculture is saying, don't touch them, do not plant these things, notify your local agriculture department so that we can confiscate them. But they don't want Americans thinking, oh, well, that's great, someone sent me some seeds. I'm just gonna plant this random Chinese herb in my backyard. See, they take over TikTok, and now they want to take over our garden too. So just make sure you pay attention to those seeds and do not plant those things in your backyard. It's so bizarre. I don't know what the downside of it really would be. I guess you don't want foreign plants in your country, right? They always say that these foreign species can take over certain gardens and forests, and it's always bad. Remember was it the murder hornets? What happened to the murder hornets, by the way? Are they all gone? Have you heard anything about the murder hornets? No?
But you can't introduce a foreign species into a non-habitant group.
Okay. My wife's saying you can't introduce a foreign species
In a wrong habitat.
in a wrong habitat.
That destroys entire habitats.
That destroys entire habitat. Seeds. Yeah, he doesn't care. As usual. All right. It's time for your stimulus update now on this Monday, August 3rd. And boy, we thought we might have a breakthrough this weekend. And then, no, once again, it falls backwards. Well, high-level members of Congress, the White House, got together over the weekend, and they said, according to Chuck Schumer, that it was the most productive meeting they've had thus far. But did we get anywhere? No. So, great, they had a productive meeting. I guess just that means no one threw like any White House china at each other. But they actually still did not get a bill passed or any kind of framework laid out. And they're still miles apart, in fact, trillions of dollars apart on the stimulus plan. Now, all of that, we'll get to their back and forth bickering on this and where they stand, all of that against a backdrop of CEOs of major companies sending a letter to members of Congress and the White House with this exact message. The CEOs of some of the world's biggest companies, they came together and they sent a letter to the White House and to Congress saying, quote, by Labor Day, we foresee a wave of permanent closures if the right steps are not taken soon, that these businesses will go out of business. Howard Schultz, of course, the CEO of Starbucks, including 100 other CEOs of Salesforce, Alphabet, Facebook, Microsoft, Walmart, McDonald's, Disney, Quibi, IBM, Merck, Marriott, and Business Roundtable, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce all sent this letter saying we need another stimulus and we need it now. So Congress not really moving very fast. But that letter coming from the nation's CEOs, some of the biggest ones. Meanwhile, this weekend, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows all made clear in separate TV interviews that they're still miles apart on this. And Mark Meadows going so far as to say that he is not optimistic that they are going to have a deal anytime soon. Listen to Mark Meadows on Face the Nation.
I can tell you that we spent the last 3 days, actually last 4 days, trying to get to some kind of consensus, at least to start negotiating. Yesterday was a step in the right direction. Our staffs are actually working today. We'll be meeting again tomorrow. But I'm not optimistic that there will be a solution in the very near term. And that's why I think the effort that Senator Martha McSally led on the Senate floor to extend the enhanced unemployment was the right move. And yet Senator Schumer and his Democrat colleagues blocked that.
So this back and forth over the idea of one of the big sticking points, the unemployment and enhanced insurance benefits right now for those people that are unemployed. Of course, those expired last week. Now, the argument from Republicans or Democrats is that, you know, the main thrust of this entire negotiation has to be around the virus right now. That has to be the focus. And that's what Nancy Pelosi was saying yesterday when she was interviewed on one of the morning shows. She said, you know, they're just not focused on the virus, and she's referring to Republicans. She's like, they're focused elsewhere. So them's were fighting words. Listen to Nancy Pelosi on that.
And that is one of the points that we still have not come to any agreement on. In our legislation, the HEROES Act, we have a strategic plan for defeating the virus: testing, tracing, treatment, isolation, mask, sanitation, and the rest. And we just still haven't come to agreement. We started this March 4th. Our first bill was testing, testing, testing. Our most recent big bill with the expansion of the PPP was about testing, testing, but it still has not been implemented by the administration. If we're going to open our economy and have our children be in schools, we have to defeat the virus.
So she went on to say that she doesn't think the administration's heart is in defeating the virus. And Steven Mnuchin wasn't having any of that. He fired back in response to that very question.
Your reaction to what you just heard Pelosi say, and are you any closer to an actual deal? It sure doesn't sound like it.
Well, first let me just say I was surprised that the speaker said we don't agree on the need to kill the virus. We absolutely agree on the need to kill the virus. And let me just say, the president acted very aggressively when this virus first came from China to shut down all travel. And since then, we have aggressively funded over 7 different vaccines into production. We're very optimistic that we will have results out of these vaccines, and we'll have a vaccine available by the end of the year. So,
Well, that might not be the case, though, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, because reports this morning show that even if we have this virus complete, that it might only be effective, according to the reports this morning, in 50% of cases. 50%. So the fact that this idea that this magical virus or this vaccine is going to solve all our problems, I think you can throw that out the window. According to these reports, it's not likely to do that at all. I mean, it might be similar like the flu vaccine. You know, there's different strains. We never know what it's going to be, and you might get this strain. There's like 200 different strains that you might possibly get, and we're not going to actually find the one that you're going to be protected against. The real question, though, is the $600 unemployment benefits. And there still seems to be this argument about that it causes you to stay home from work. That if you get this $600, you do not want to go back to work. You'll fight tooth and nail to stay home. And Nancy Pelosi said this is just garbage. That $600 is vital to the American people right now. Take a listen to this point about the $600.
But the $600 is essential. It's essential for America's working families. And again, to condescend, to disrespect their motivation is so amazing how insistent the Republicans are about a working family and their $600 and how cavalier they are about other money that is going out. But the fact is, we have to get back to the strategic plan. And in the HEROES Act, we have 3 pillars that address this concern. First, honor our heroes, state and local government, healthcare.
And then she goes in to talk about the HEROES Act again. But the $600 plan, we now know, according to the studies, does not hinder people from going back to work. In fact, it kept people able to pay their bills. And according to the Yale study, this was not a disincentive for people going back to work. Neil Kashkari is a Fed official from Minnesota. He was asked that very same question from John Dickerson on Face the Nation. He's a Federal Reserve official. He doesn't really play politics, but he was asked specifically, do you have any evidence that this $600 hurts people, that it keeps people from going back to work? And again, the reports say no. What does Neil have to say about it? Listen.
Let me say, inside of this bill, they're debating on the $600 unemployment, weekly unemployment help. One of the Republican arguments is that at $600, there's some number of workers who are getting paid more than they would in a job, and therefore they're staying at home. Do you see any evidence in the data that supports public policy based on that idea?
Well, not right now. Not when 20 million people are out of work relative to February. There's just so many fewer jobs than there are workers available. At some point, it'll be an issue. When we get the unemployment rate eventually back down to 5%, and we want to get it back down to 4% or 3.5% where it was before, yes, that disincentive to work becomes material. But right now, it's simply not a factor in the macro economy that we have in the U.S. because we have so many millions of Americans out of work.
There you go. That's not me saying that. That's both the Yale report and Neil Kashkari, Federal Reserve official out of Minnesota. And so, this idea that this is somehow going to hurt us, and we're quibbling over $600. That's at the heart of all of this right now. They wanted to pass this sort of like emergency extension last week for 1 week. It's not a solution. It's a temporary fix. And they want to keep punting this further. Now, they go on vacation. The Senate goes on vacation on August 7th, which is just this Friday. And are they going to go for a whole month without having a plan in place? I mean, that would be political malpractice if they do that. On the House side, Nancy Pelosi has already canceled vacation for August. I don't know what Mitch McConnell is going to do. He's been quiet all weekend. We haven't heard from him. And it sounds like the White House is sort of leading the charge on all of this right now. And, I don't know. I have a theory I'll get to in just a second. But Senator Bernie Sanders was asked about all of this. He's been so anti-Senate lately. He thinks there's just been an absolute lack of leadership on the Senate side. And he was fired up this weekend. Listen to him take a swipe at Mitch McConnell.
During this entire period, 2.5 months, the U.S. Senate has done nothing. There has been no piece of legislation under Republican leadership coming to the floor of the Senate to deal with this crisis. So as you've indicated, we got 30 million people who have lost their jobs, who are now going to lose that $600 that they desperately need. We got millions of people who are facing eviction and foreclosure. We have people and children in this country who are going hungry. The immediate crisis is that we have got to respond and respond now, today, tomorrow, because people right now are at their wits' end. They are literally wondering how they're going to feed their families in the richest country on earth. Second of all, if I may, picking up on the point that you made, and by the way, Ali, congratulations, because that type of discussion about income and wealth inequality is not heard on corporate media terribly often. That's the simple truth.
And he goes on to talk about income inequality, which is something we absolutely need to tackle in this country, but we haven't. So this $600 thing, I saw someone just saying in the chat, like, even if there are a few bad apples that milk it and stay home, do you think that you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, that those few bad apples, sort of mixed metaphors here, but really, no. The data is in. People need this money to pay for insulin for their children, to put food on their table. As one of our viewers this morning said, that $600, they finally actually got their unemployment. They never got it for 17 weeks. They were waiting for it. They finally received it. He had to pay up all of his bills. All of his bills. He got caught up, paid off all of his back bills that he owed, and now he finds out the $600 is done. And he can't continue. He said he feels like he's fighting a losing battle. They've lost their job. They're being forced to stay home. The U.S. is the richest country in the world, and yet we're quibbling over $600. Well, the Democrats are holding firm on that. Steny Hoyer basically said it's $600 or bust. We're not moving. We're not changing that. You better extend it. And Republicans appear to be, I don't know, maybe waffling a little bit. I don't know. We'll see on this. But there is something else happening on the President Trump side. As you know, his poll numbers are not looking good right now. There's only a few weeks until early voting starts. And didn't I predict this, folks? I predicted this last week here on the show, and I threw it out to you to see if you would agree with me, that, you know, the White House is going to start to paint Mitch McConnell as the bad cop. And clearly he has been in this whole process, right? That they're going to try to paint him as the bad cop, and the White House, to try to salvage their campaign right now, President Trump is going to come in and say, hey, you know what, Congress, get off the pot. I'm going to solve this. And they're going to move in some unilateral way with executive order in order to pass some sort of a stimulus plan. And that's exactly what appears to be happening, according to reporting in the Washington Post this morning. And from Jeff Stein, who's done an amazing job during this whole coronavirus stimulus package. The Trump administration examining options for unilateral action if no coronavirus deal is reached with Congress. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the Trump administration is looking at options to get some of this stuff through without having to rely on Congress at all. This is according to people with knowledge of these deliberations. Stephen Moore and Phil Kerpen also weighed in on this. These are two outside economic advisors to the White House. They published a Wall Street Journal opinion piece on Sunday that urged President Trump to declare a national economic emergency and announced that the Internal Revenue Service, that the IRS, would temporarily defer the collection of payroll taxes. Now, President Trump's got to love that. Stephen Moore is a White House advisor, an economic advisor, although a third-party advisor, very close with the White House. This idea that President Trump could, after all, get his payroll tax that he wants, his payroll tax cut that he wants. Remember, Congress has said, no, we're not going to put that in the bill. Mitch McConnell said, that's out, we're done. He could declare a national economic state of emergency and cut payroll taxes for people, among other things. What else could he do? It's hard to know exactly, and according to the reports, they're not quite sure exactly what he could fully do in this. But he might be able to allow some sort of a moratorium. He could maybe step in with an eviction moratorium executive order. He could maybe step in with a payroll tax cut. Maybe he could also step in by executive order and issue these additional $600 per week unemployment benefits. You know, the House of Representatives controls the power of the purse, right? The funding has to come from the House of Representatives. That's how our Constitution is written. And the Senate does not, the House does. But under an economic national emergency, could the president come riding in on a white horse and try to save the day? I mean, that could be one smart move. To me, it's too little too late at this point. I mean, this is something the president should have shown leadership on back in April and May. Should have been out there in May saying, hey, that's great that we passed that first stimulus, but guess what? This is going to run out soon, and we need to get something on the books right now through the end of the year. We need to get all parties together. Don't go on vacation. Republicans, you're not going on vacation. Democrats, you're not going on vacation. Let's go to Camp David and have a meeting and get a new plan put together. But they didn't, and now it's too little too late. But this is the reporting this morning from the Washington Post. Could the president, if he gets frustrated with these back and forth negotiations right now with the Senate leadership, that he's going to do an end around? I have to tell you, people want to say, oh, it's the Democrats holding things up. It's not. They already passed the HEROES Act back in March, or back in May, I'm sorry. And Republicans right now, there's about 20 Republicans, as Lindsey Graham said, that won't vote for anything. They're just fine to not pass any bill at all on the Senate side, on the Republican side. They think they've already spent too much money. And the country, yes, we are sitting on $27 trillion in national debt. And that's their argument, that we've already spent enough money. But it's okay for us to keep pumping trillions into Wall Street, right? Make sure that everyone on Wall Street's happy and those businesses are kept afloat, airlines and others, and go through federal bankruptcy protection and everything else. But the American people who are going to be out of their job, out of their home, they get screwed once again. Folks, the eviction crisis is here. The housing crisis is here. And it looks much different than it did in 2008. So let's talk about housing. Let's talk about the eviction crisis. The summer's housing market is really split into two right now. On the one side, according to the Washington Post, you have cell phones ringing off the hook right now. Realtors are super busy. We're in the middle of a housing boom as people are trying to buy as many houses as they can find. They're getting into bidding wars, going out to the suburbs. Houses are sitting on the market for a record few days before they're sold. People are getting into bidding wars, so those prices are being driven up. Housing prices are rising. Appraisal numbers are coming in higher across the country. But when I say it's a tale of two different economies right now, the other side of this is all of those renters who can't afford to pay their rent, and all of those people who can't afford to pay their mortgages are now facing the loss of their homes. We're seeing a huge jump in those mortgage forbearances right now. We're seeing about an 11% increase in mortgage forbearance for those jumbo loans. People just simply can't afford to pay them. And guess what? Those moratoriums, those times for those loans are up. The moratorium on those things, the forbearance has lifted, and now you're expected to pay. And now here we are at the beginning of August, just a few days into August, and the rent is due. The moratorium is up in many states. Now, certain states have taken it upon themselves to extend it for a few weeks, but the federal moratorium is up. And guess what? The federal moratorium only backed, I didn't know this, but the federal moratorium only backed those loans that were Fannie and Freddie based loans. Did you know that? I didn't. There's a wide swath of loans that aren't covered by that. That means that there's going to be a huge impact on those people that don't have those types of loans. It's completely uneven right now. The moratorium only covered tenants in buildings with federally backed mortgages. States that passed their own eviction limits, but some, such as Texas, have already let them expire. Another sign of things to come, attorneys in Houston are seeing long lines at courthouses. And I don't know if you've experienced this. Let me know in the comments if you've been already through this or not. And they're seeing long lines at the courthouses. Sometimes attorneys there are saying people are standing shoulder to shoulder, awaiting their eviction hearings. They're stuck between tenants who can't or simply won't pay up, and the banks that still expect mortgage payments every month. And landlords are also feeling the squeeze. Like I've said before, don't vilify landlords in this situation. That's a huge mistake to do. I know maybe it's the populist thing to do, is to vilify landlords, but most landlords are not wealthy. They have one rental property, and very often they have a mortgage on that rental property. So what happens, it's not the tenant's fault that they've lost their job, but it's also not the landlord's fault. Now you have this whole cycle. So you have the tenant that can't pay rent, And then you have the landlord that can't pay the mortgage or the taxes that supports the city. So and guess what? State and local governments are collapsing right now with revenue. Sanitation workers being laid off, city police departments, firefighters that rely on those property taxes to keep it going. Hassan Minhaj did a really excellent report on this on his Netflix show Patriot Act a few weeks ago on the eviction crisis. And he talked about that extensively. And he talked about the domino effect of what happens during these eviction processes. And it's not just those that get evicted and lose their home, it's the landlord, it's the city, it's all of it. How is Congress so ignorant about this? I don't understand. Has anyone, well, we saw during their tech hearing last week, well, they didn't even know how the internet worked. Or do we really expect them to understand how this entire process comes together in one cohesive ball? And that's how we thrive as a country, when all of these pieces work well, when the tenants are able to pay their rent, when the cost of living is not out of whack. We have an affordable housing crisis in this country, so the cost of rent is exceeding what people are able to take home in their paychecks. Landlords can't pay their mortgage, so we go into forbearance. The banks then don't want to lend to other people because now they're sitting on all these foreclosures. State and local governments can't provide the basic services that we need, like sanitation and other things, because they're not able to take home property taxes to pay their rent, to pay their paychecks. So they're furloughed. It's all one big ecosystem. And Congress is allowing it to collapse. The Senate Republicans had better get their head examined, and they better get their head examined fast. This is a disaster of epic proportions. I'm not being hyperbolic here. I mean, we are about to see a homeless crisis. 30 million people could be out of their homes in America. People want to joke about liberal San Francisco with the homeless population there being out of control. Guess what? It's going to start happening all over the country. You can make fun of liberal San Francisco all you want. It's going to start happening in conservative Houston and conservative Oklahoma City and conservative Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, this looks a lot different than it did in 2008. It's much different. In fact, it might be the exact opposite of 2008, because foreclosures then soared and single-family homes stood empty out in the suburbs, and everyone kind of fled to the city. Now, there's an undersupply of suburban housing, and everyone wants to get out of the city and go out to the suburbs. And there's hot market in new construction right now. That's off the charts. We don't have enough homes in this country. The problem today is that in the cities where the pandemic has accelerated, there's a crisis of affordability. So you have higher coronavirus in the cities, plus the housing prices are way out of whack with what people make and earn. And now they're being forced out, and you're going to have this massive commercial real estate collapse in these big cities. In 50 of the biggest cities, you're already seeing it. According to the Wall Street Journal, without income, renters can't pay rent, utilities, without monthly payments, landlords and other companies can't make mortgages and bond payments. Housing costs in cities have been approaching a crisis, of course, for years. Thanks to the pandemic, that crisis is here. And now, as the Wall Street Journal says, as the Atlantic reports, it's dangerously close to spiraling out of control, totally. Fannie or Freddie Mac skyrocketed with their number of forbearances. Many high-income borrowers are in trouble too. So it's not just low-income borrowers, it's high-income borrowers too. As of mid-June, 11.8% of all jumbo loans went into forbearance. Wow, 11.8%? That's twice as many as in April. There's a simple reason for this unevenness of the housing crisis right now, and it's the amount of money that people take home. And so you want to talk about wage inequality in this country, let's do it. The median income for home buyers in this country today is $93,000 for home buyers, while renters are substantially poorer, and household earnings there are about $35,000 a year. And they've been hit hardest by their lost jobs. Those service sector employees, those people that work at the restaurants and the hospitality industry, these are the people that live in homes that are paying rent right now, a huge swath of them. And that, my friends, is what's causing this problem. Now, House Democrats have passed the HEROES Act. Now, I'm not praising this bill in any way. All I'm saying is there are key portions of it that I think are significant to keep us out of a major housing collapse and crisis beyond where we already are. They asked for $200 billion, both for rental assistance and another $100 billion for mortgage forbearance assistance for those landlords that haven't been able to pay their mortgage right now. That would allow these tenants to get caught up on rent. It would keep us from having these homes go into foreclosure, banks not wanting to lend as a result of it, people able to put food on their table and provide, housing for their families. We need food and shelter in this country. And here we are, the richest country in the world, and we are looking like a third world country right now. And you know what's sad is that many third world countries during this pandemic have handled this better than we have. Fact. We're looking like a bunch of babies right now. We better get our act together on this, and we better get it on it fast. But I've been saying that for 2 months. And Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans have been concerned with other things, and they've admitted that up to 20 or 21 of their senators wouldn't vote for anything right now. But they're okay every year passing a $900 billion defense budget so we can get jet aircraft, so that we can go kill somebody on a camel in Afghanistan. I'm sorry that this is all starting to sound like a redo of the 2000s when we went through the housing crisis, but it's different. It's totally different. It's the exact opposite. The difference now, though, is that we have an ability to stop it. The United States government could step in and instantly, in one day, could stop this thing. I'm going to float something right now that I can't believe I'm going to say, but I think is incredibly important for the future of this country. I had not been necessarily a big fan of or in favor of this idea of universal basic income, this idea that maybe we would have $1,000 a month, something that presidential candidates have been floating, this idea of $2,000 a month. I love the idea of either Congress or the Federal Reserve being able to step in and providing some sort of national universal basic income for at least the next year to 2 years until we get out of this mess. And maybe even longer than that. You see, what if Americans had $2,000 a month? Do you think we would turn into lazy sacks and do nothing? Is that in our DNA? I don't believe so. Some of the early reporting and case studies on people that received that $600 a week beyond what they were making at their jobs, guess what they did? They didn't just sit around and play Xbox. According to the reports, they actually started starting businesses, giving back to the economy in new and better ways. One individual in one report I read, now this is anecdotal of course, but there were more case studies just like this individual. 23 years old, working in a fast food industry or working in that kind of capacity, making $11 an hour. Because of the $600 a week, was able to, on the side, start his creative graphic design company. He didn't have that anxiety of not being able to pay the bills. He had that extra padding, and it allowed him, in those extra hours of free time, to start really working on something. Not being so concerned that he would have to take a second job just to pay for his rent. I like to say there are 168 hours in a week. And even if you work 40 hours a week for somebody else, and you sleep 8 hours a day, which most of us don't, we're the most sleep-deprived country in the world, that leaves you 72 hours in a week on which to build a business, to come up with something creative to do. But if you're so anxious about being able to pay your bills, you're going to be taking a second job. Then you're not going to be sleeping. You're working 2 shifts, 2 different jobs. How are you ever going to be able to create an environment that you could give back to the economy in a bigger way by creating a business or following some passion that you have in your life? So, I'm putting it out there. This isn't revolutionary. We've heard it before. We've heard it from, other, like I said, from presidential candidates about universal basic income. And it sounds like pure socialism, right? Is it, though? I'm not a socialist. I've never felt that way. But during this pandemic, when I see what other countries have been able to do and able to keep their citizenry from losing their homes, losing their jobs, losing their ability to put food on the table, I'm leaning in this direction. How bad would it be if American families who've been marginalized for their entire lives, making $35,000 a year, were able to make an additional $1,000 a month that they could provide food for their family, pump money back into the economy, buying back to school items like backpacks and pencils and books and those types of things? We're seeing right now, according to a report I read this morning, that families are not even buying that stuff. Even if they are going back to school, they're just getting some hand-me-down stuff that they might find around, but they're not going into Target and Walmart and buying up a bunch of back-to-school items. And that's a multi-billion-a-year industry that these companies rely on, the back-to-school sales. See, it's all part of this one big process. The United States government, you may say, well, we can't do universal basic income. Where are we going to get this money? Well, I'll tell you where we get the money. The same place, from the same source that we get all of this money to prop up Wall Street. You take the money that we lend out, the money that we're right now at borrowing cost of zero, that we're pumping into our own economy in the form of Wall Street, into these other big businesses. What if we directed some of that money to the American people? How are they different than the businesses we prop up? Why is it okay for us to funnel trillions to keep them afloat, but we can't do that for Americans, the average American? One thing you could do is write to your member of Congress, put it down on a piece of paper, and send an email, send a letter to one member of your Congress. Find out who your representatives are. Call on them to do this. Call them. Get on the phone and call the switchboard at the U.S. Capitol and leave a voicemail message. Flood them with calls. But I'm coming around to it, folks, because America is in terrible shape. And, I've just gone back and forth on this over the many months and thought about what are the broader implications of this. And sure, we'd have to cut a lot. We'd have to look at our entitlement system. We'd have to look at Social Security. We'd have to look at our medical system. We'd have to look at the ways that we could make this happen. We'd have to look at our defense budget. I love to slam on that. $900 billion a year for our defense budget. So what? We can make gas masks to keep, defense contractors happy? We need to buy up jets for what reason? But we love to stay in these perpetual wars, right? So we can keep these defense contractors happy. These endless wars that never end, right? These war in Afghanistan, the longest American war now. Come on. I thought we were supposed to end that. Didn't Trump say we were going to end these needless wars? Still going. Let's look at the coronavirus now around the world and an update there. The U.S. is not containing it well. White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx was on yesterday on CNN. She said the coronavirus is more widespread than before. It's impacting rural as well as urban areas. And if you read our free newsletter this morning, you'll notice that, look, we have states like Hawaii and Alaska and Montana and Oregon and other areas in the Midwest that are now showing up as epicenters of all of this. This sort of whack-a-mole approach. It's like this virus fatigue that we're all suffering. And people just don't want to take care of it. Neil Kashkari was asked about this, and he said something rather startling. And I put this in the newsletter this morning. He said, look, we need to stop this. The only way to do it, we need to go have a national lockdown, 4 to 6 weeks, and make it mandatory, and we need to make it tight and no breaking the law, and everyone needs to stay home for 4 to 6 weeks Total lockdown is how we can contain this. Here's what he had to say about it.
Well, you're right. It's really the virus and our ability to control the virus either through clamping back down, getting the case count down so that we can test and trace and keep this thing under control, or eventually getting a vaccine or a robust therapy. That's the only way we're really going to have a real robust economic recovery. Otherwise, we're going to have flare-ups, lockdowns, and a very halting recovery with many more job losses and many more bankruptcies for an extended period of time, unfortunately.
So talking on the business side, we're going to see we've already seen a flood of bankruptcies, a flood of them. And we're going to see way more. And again, I come back to that letter that was sent to the White House and Congress from all of those members, the CEOs of, we had Starbucks, Walmart, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, McDonald's, Disney, Quibi, IBM, Merck, Marriott, the Business Roundtable, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They sent a letter to Congress saying, we're going to have so many closures, it's going to make your head spin. And they said, quote, by Labor Day, we foresee a wave of permanent closures if the right steps are not taken soon. You're going to just see businesses decimated across the country. Maybe that's the only thing that Congress really cares about, is when businesses go out of business. You know, the average individual voter, it doesn't seem that they care much about that at all. It's so sad. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. Make sure that please you smash that like button if you'd be so kind. Let's see if we can push this up to 10,000 likes on today's video. That'd be a nice goal. And also, please, please, please subscribe to our free morning newsletter. It's totally free. It's delivered to your inbox first thing every morning. Totally free. You can read it in about 5 minutes. It'll give you the news that I think is important to start your day, plus a little bit of humor. Grover really appreciates it. Don't you, buddy? Yes, you do. Don't knock the camera, buddy. He's just stretching out over there on the couch. I think he's buried himself deep inside the blanket today. Can't really see him over there. See if he gets up in a few minutes and moves around. But he's been a lazy dog today. What do you guys think about this idea of a universal basic income? Now, what do you think about, or just temporary? You know, I have been in favor. I've been calling for, since the beginning of this show, when we started doing this show, we do this show every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I have been calling for this $2,000 per month until the end of the year. I agree with the Senators Kamala Harris, Ed Markey, and Bernie Sanders, who the Emergency Money for the People Act, that got nowhere, of course. That ended quickly. But I would love to know your thoughts on it. What's the downside? The downside is, yes, we are let's be honest, right? The downside is we are $27 trillion in debt. A lot of that debt had gone to foreign leaders or foreign countries like the Chinese and others. But now, as Neil Kashkari has said, right now, we are not spending money that we can't afford right now. He said our borrowing capacity, we're not having to send money to China. We're not having to have them lend us money. He said, because we've now had more Americans saving money during this crisis, we actually have a cushion that allows us to handle this crisis now. I thought that was an interesting perspective. He said, right now, with the interest rates where they are, our borrowing capacity is high, we should not be focused on the debt piece of this. Well, if that's the case, then all of these people who are about to be out of their homes could have this protection put in place. Melo Mash, thank you for your super chat. That's right. But I'm not going to let the people know being human is revolutionary nowadays. I agree that we have to be taking these things more seriously. You know, look, Europe is seeing a resurgence of coronavirus right now in Spain and France, and it's happening among young people. So Europe, which had really done a great job after they had not done a good job, managed to get rid of it nearly. We've now seen a surge in cases in France and Spain because people hanging out at beaches and nightclubs. So you're seeing, and the authorities there are saying we better clamp back down again and be very careful because we did such a great job keeping this thing contained after it got out of hand, and now we're going to go backwards again. And the United States has been a mess with this. Thank you for your super chats. Malcolm Small, thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Guinan Gap. I think we should test it with people on unemployment and see what happens. I agree. You know, I don't believe Americans are lazy people. Are you going to have some people that take advantage of it? Of course. You always will. And then the media and and political parties will always rally around those few anecdotal stories, right? They'll say, well, we saw this one family, all they were doing was just hanging out in their backyard all day, doing nothing, playing loud music all day, you know. And they're not contributing to society. They probably get universal basic income. So we shouldn't support that. Congress is going to meet again today to try to hammer out further. Nancy Pelosi and Mark Meadows, Stephen Mnuchin, and others are going to get together today to hammer out some more details of this plan if they can get it. Remember, Senate Republicans go on vacation on Friday for a month. There has been no word that they are going to cancel that vacation. Mitch McConnell doesn't seem to have any support for canceling that vacation. So as it stands right now, they are going to go on vacation, I guess. Nancy Pelosi has canceled that for the House of Representatives. Thank you so much. Grover hopped up. Augustino, you're not talking to me, right? Augustino Potty says, I'm disabled, I dare you. Oh, I thought you said, how dare you? Augustino says, I am disabled and I dare you to say that I live on a fixed income. I'm not saying that. Yeah, I say we cancel vacation. Christine Findley says, don't we already support some that choose not to work? Right, we do. But if the government managed to cut the waste and figure out a way to make this happen, they could. They could. We could put a Marshall Plan in place to figure out how to provide some sort of a basic economic plan for Americans. Other countries do it, and they're doing just fine. You know, why is Denmark considered the happiest country in the world? Why? I would love for every one of you, do a search tonight, watch the 60 Minutes piece on Denmark from a few years ago. You know, Denmark is always routinely called the happiest country in the world. You know, college students there, they have no desire to leave that country. They feel like the argument, of course, is that, oh, you have no ambition because you have everything kind of taken care of for you. And all those college kids that are interviewed in the piece are like, no, I want to start my business. I want to be a writer. I want to start a computer company. I want to do. It's like, no, that's not true at all. They have health care. Their standard of living is fantastic. Have you seen the stories about Iceland over the past few days? There's been a lot of stories about Iceland. You know, it's the safest country in the world. They have like no coronavirus. It's doing, you know, it's more costly to live there, but the standard of living is fantastic. Same is true in Norway and in other countries. You know, we can sit there and say we're the greatest country in the world, but then on the other, we can say that, but then we also don't act like it. So how long do we keep saying that until we actually start realizing that's not the truth? I want to challenge everyone to prove it. Like, if this is the greatest country in the world, then when do we start acting like it? What do you think, Grover? Yep, I did the show shoeless today. It's hot, hot, hot. And it's my own show. I can do the show shoeless. Heck, I could do it pantsless if I wanted to, but I won't do that to you. I won't do that to you, but I will ask you kindly again to subscribe to our newsletter. If you haven't already done so, please, it's at morninginvest.com. Sign up for free. And we have a great community of people here on the show. It just makes me so flattered that you guys join us every day. Thank you, everyone, for your kind super chats. Karen Baker says, my husband lost his job after 19 years, and now I have 2 kids that I can't send to school because of the way they want to do it. It's just ridiculous. They want to sign a death waiver to go to school. Are you serious? Are they actually asking your family to sign waivers? Really? Love Lasarius says, thank you for your super chat. I see 3 things that could happen. 1, we go into a civil war, or we take up arms against government, or we get invaded by China. It's sad, but that's really the honest thoughts of it. I'm not seeing us being invaded by China, but I mean, all experts agree that we are not the superpower that we once were. And in my mind, that's okay. What does being a superpower get us? It means we have to police the world, spend trillions of dollars policing the world. Okay. Well, but we can't even take care of ourselves at home. You know, there's been a lot of countries that were the leaders in the world, right? That ran the entire world. And they've said, you know what, we used to be the greatest country in the world. We're okay with not doing that anymore. We tried it for 200 years. America, you're a young country. Why don't you give it a try for a few years? And pretty soon you'll realize it's not all it's cracked up to be. Do we want China to be the supreme power in the world? No. Overcast Skyline, I liked your comment here in the chat. It says, we already have a universal basic income. It's only for the people that run this country. We pay them no matter if they choose to work or not. That's right, Congress. Yes. Oh, thank you to all of you who subscribed to our new paranormal channel. I saw someone was saying, Revolver to Go, and says, Mr. Morris, please run for office, please. You know, I love doing this show too much and trying to bring you the news that I think is important for you and your family. Plus, I don't know that I could do that to my family, to do something like that. But thank you guys so much for the all of you who subscribed to our new. We have a new. Many of you know I love the paranormal news. We have a new story. As soon as we're done editing, it's going to be up on what happened in Iran with this amazing UFO story. Anyways, over here at our other channel, it's our Paranormal Post YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/paranormalpost. We published our story on Loch Ness this week and the UFO wreckage story, but we have a big UFO story coming out. Hopefully it'll be out tonight, I'm hoping. I just have to wait and see once we get done editing. It's a lot of work. But anyone who wants to subscribe, who likes unsolved mysteries, government cover-ups, science-based data analysis of UFOs and other things like that, mysterious stories. I have, quite a fascination with all of that. So our new Paranormal Post channel is almost at 7,000 subscribers. So thank you so much to all of you who subscribe. I'd love for you guys to check it out and give me your feedback. Thank you. Stacy Holt says, I love that channel too. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Someone was kind, says, I don't want Clayton to run for president. I don't want to lose my morning show. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I look like an alien. Hemet says I look like an alien. Do I? Do I? Maybe I need to lose some weight. Maybe that's why. Well, thank you everyone for subscribing. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday. We'll be watching these negotiations over the next 24 hours. We'll see where this goes. I'd like to have Andrew Yang on the show to talk more about universal basic income. We have a call out to his office. I really would love to have him come on to talk about that. What are the arguments against that? So it would be great to have Andrew here on the show to talk more deeply about universal basic income. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for all of your likes. Again, we're pushing it up to 10,000 likes on today's video. Thank you so much, everyone. Grover says thank you. My 5-month-old little baby. Man, he's getting so big. He's getting big. To rub his ears. All right, much love to all of you. We will see you back here once again tomorrow morning at the same time. If you're new here, we do this show every morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 a.m. Pacific Time. We'll see you next time, everyone.